Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TPL Thursdays, your weekly webinar from the Education Authority devoted to teacher professional learning. Once again, you're all very welcome, and you will have noticed that I've muted everyone who has the presenter's microphone and camera just for the purposes of allowing the presenters to present unhindered. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we will get to the questions and answers at the end of the presentation, and I'm sure the team will only be too glad to help you with that. As always, we are always on the lookout for presenters and ideas for future sessions. So I will put the link to that little Microsoft form in chat. And today's presentation will also be shared with you when I send the evaluation link out tomorrow. I'm very pleased to welcome Robert Smith and the team from Ashgrove Primary School today. And they will be talking about the development of thinking skills and personal capabilities in the primary school classroom. And having seen the presentation, I'm really looking forward to hearing from them. So Robert, do you want to start? And if you just share the presentation there.
Hello, Jarlath. Nice to see you again.
How are you, Robert?
I'm very well. Can you hear me okay?
Can indeed, yeah.
That's great, Jarlath. Thank you. I think we're just waiting for the presentation just to come up on the screen. Jarlath, are you going to share that presentation? Yes?
I can share it, or you can share it, whichever. I can share it here, yeah.
Oh, please, thank you. Yeah.
Right, yeah. I go to the window. Yep, that's it there. And you just remind me then when you need the slide changed.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Jarlath, for asking us and giving us the opportunity to share some of our work in Ashgrove with you. So, Jarlath, if you don't mind, we'll maybe skip on to slide 3 for us, please. So, folks, just want to introduce just a couple of my colleagues who will be helping with our presentation this afternoon. First of all, we have Jill Carberry, and she has been one of the key teachers who have been developing and leading our work with thinking skills and personal capabilities in our school. And I also have joining me as well Mr. Dave McComb, who is our Vice Principal and one of our forefront teachers who's really has been working and developing thinking skills and personal capabilities as well. So just the next slide, Jarlath, please. So folks, I just wanted to share with you just a bit of a roadmap for the afternoon and really some of the things that we will be discussing and sharing with you. So one of the main things at number 1 is we wanted to have a discussion with you about what is metacognition. And I know it sounds like quite a huge term, but we wanted to sort of really define that and discuss amongst ourselves really what that is. We also secondly want to put our work with thinking skills and personal capabilities into context in our school development plan. Jill is going to share with us some of our work on visible thinking routines, and she's going to share some examples. And one of those examples is I see, I think, I feel, I wonder. I'm then going to share with us some of our work on the use of our thinking frames and the habits of mind. And then I'm going to pass over to Dave, who's going to share with us some of our work on our thinking hats. And he's also going to then go over some of the impact of our thinking skills and personal capabilities work, and then take some questions from you. Thank you, Jarlath. Next slide for us, please. So folks, just wanted to start off really with asking that question of what is metacognition? And it really is, it sounds like a really huge term, doesn't it? But the Education Endowment Foundation defines metacognition as being about a pupil's ability to monitor, direct and review their learning. Effective metacognition strategies get learners to think about their own learning more explicitly, usually by teaching them to set goals, monitor and evaluate their own academic progress. And I suppose whenever we put that into the context of the Northern Ireland curriculum, it really does sit in there very, very well with thinking skills and personal capabilities. But we do find that definition really quite wordy. So on the next slide, we have shared with you what we think of as a really nice, neat and tidy definition of what metacognition is. And in Ash Grove, we have found a quote by Mannion and McAllister, who define metacognition as monitoring and controlling our thought processes. And that for us really just encapsulates really quite nicely and quite concisely about what it is we're trying to develop. Next slide, please, Jarlath. So in school, we have been working to become an accredited thinking school through the University of Exeter. And this has been a bit of a journey for us that has taken, we're really moving now into the third year of that journey. And part of that is we are becoming an accredited thinking school. So we wanted to share with you really what is a thinking school. And a thinking school involves both students and staff learning how to think reflectively, critically, and creatively to employ these skills and techniques in the construction of a meaningful curriculum and associated activities. And that is from Professor Bob Burton in the University of Exeter. So way back a few years ago, when we were developing on the first part of our journey, we decided that we wanted to put into place a thinking schools drive team. And we identified some key members of staff in our drive team who were to come together and really to define a vision of what it was we wanted to achieve. So we had, first of all, our head of foundation stage. I think Jarlath would just skip forward there a few slides. If we could go, Jarlath, to our thinking schools drive team slide, just another one back there for me, please. So our Carolyn Morrison, our head of foundation stage, we have Jill, who's joined us now this afternoon. We've Dave, who's our head of key stage and our vice principal, our head of key stage 1, and of course myself then as the principal of the school. So part of that was that we wanted to think about our school development plan. And just the next slide there, Jarlath, please. And in our school development plan, we came up with three very clear goals for our development. And you can see here that this is actually one of our thinking tools that we have developed. And this is called a whole part thinking frame. And you can see here over on the right hand side, we have our school development plan, which is then broken down into 3 different parts. So our first goal in our school development plan was to develop deeper, creative and critical thinking across our school. And goal number 2 was to implement a programme of care and professional development to support the well-being of our community. And goal 3 was to recover standards and achievements, fulfilling individual pupil potential. And just the next slide, Jarlath, please. So we really wanted to share with you, why did we decide as a school to try to develop thinking skills and personal capabilities? And really, I suppose it really does come down into the context of the new school development plan and where we were at that particular time. And like all schools, we were emerging out of COVID, and in consultation with our staff and with our pupils, we did realise that our learners, our children, and maybe to a degree our staff, maybe weren't as resilient as they were pre-COVID. And in addition, the standards attained by the children were significantly below pre-COVID levels. So as a staff, we did agree that we really wanted to develop children's resilience and equip them with the skills to become much more resilient learners. So as a staff, we agreed that a priority was to develop creative and critical thinking. So at the start of our journey, we identified that we really wanted to work with the University of Exeter and Thinking Matters. So we started that journey then in 2021. Part of that was to train our staff in understanding metacognition and neuroplasticity, and we'll come on to a bit more of that later on in the presentation. We started off very structured way, and we introduced thinking frames, and I will move on to go into those in more detail later on. The whole drive team attended something called the Festival of Metacognition, and that was in Birmingham, and we went there for 2 years in a row, and we find that really pivotal in our work, and really has inspired us to keep moving forward. We've also developed the Art Costa and Beta Calyx 16 Habits of Mind, and which we'll be able to share some of that work with you as well this afternoon. And one of the key things as well has been the use of De Bono's 6 thinking hats. And just at the bottom here, I've mentioned about MALS, which is myself as learner scale. And MALS is a standardized test that we have introduced into school to really measure the impact of our Thinking Matters journey and the development of thinking skills and personal capabilities. Just the next slide, please. So as a school, we really are setting about to develop a culture of thinking skills and metacognitive learners. And it's almost forming like a very strong building for us. So right down at the bottom, we have a research and evidence informed actions, and that we have 3 very strong pillars. So we've developed a very clear vision of what it is that we want to achieve. The central pillar here has been very significant for us, and that is to develop a common language around thinking and metacognition in our school, and that is very highly visible now in Ashgrove. And for us also then with the pink column to use common tools and strategies throughout the school. As our children move from primary 1 all the way up through to P7, our thinking skills and our tools become ever more complex, but we very clearly have a very structured line of progression as to the skills that we're building in each year group and how they then develop into very highly skilled P7s as they leave us. So the next slide, please, Jarlath. So we have 4 metacognitive strategies that we're going to share with you this afternoon. And Jill is going to chat through with us about our visible thinking routines. And I'm going to have a talk with us about our thinking frames and our habits of mind. And finally, Dave is going to introduce and have a chat about our thinking hats. So folks, at this point, I'm going to hand over to Jill Carberry, and she will chat us through the next part of the presentation. So thank you, Jill.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Visible thinking routines, these were developed by a research group called Project Zero, and they sought to explore and cultivate thinking dispositions in school settings. There are lots of different types of routines. The routines themselves can be classified into 3 main areas. The first area is about introducing and exploring ideas. The second group is synthesizing and organizing ideas. And the third group is about digging deeper into ideas. The routines themselves can be used right across the school, right from P1 up to P7. Some of them are more suitable for a foundation stage, and some of them that, because they involve a greater degree of maturity and independence, are better used effectively in Key Stage 2. So we use a range of different visible thinking routines, but one of the thinking routines, and it's on the next slide, is see, I feel, I think, I wonder. So we use this as plenaries, as introductions to lessons, and we do a whole school image once every half term. So the children look at the image, they simply write down what they see, what they think, what they feel, and what they wonder. And it's great just for getting discussions going. Kids come up with great ideas. They see things that we don't do all the time. And it's just really good for getting thinking and discussion types going on. Some of the other visible thinking routines that are used are the 4 C's, which stands for connections, challenges, concepts, and changes. Another one which has been used in Key Stage 2, which is very useful, is called Microlab, which is allows the children to explore different viewpoints and perspectives. In P5, we use the I see, I feel, I think, I wonder. Another one which is used, I suppose, which has really replaced our KWL grid, is Think, Puzzle, Explore. And another one which the kids have really grown to love is called I used to think, now I think. All thinking routines, they can be used for a variety of reasons. They can be used for plenaries and end of topic and summarising. Another thinking routine which we have used just a matter of weeks ago in P5 is sentence, phrase, word, which is really good for summarising. So at the end of a topic or an end of a lesson, the kids can summarise what they have learned in a sentence, take it down further, then summarise it into a phrase, and then give us one key word for what the key message of the lesson has been. So really, in conclusion, visible thinking routines are cross-curricular. They can be used across all age groups, and they really do help engage the learners and help promote metacognition. They are designed to be easily woven into classroom practice. If you're looking for further information, 2 good websites you might want to check out. www, and Dave's just going to type it up, www.visiblethinkingpz.org or www.pz.harvard.edu/projects. And you can find all the different visible thinking routines here if you're looking to have a go. Okay, I'm just going to put up on us the next slide, Charlotte. It's one of the pictures that we have used in the past for I see, I feel, I think, I wonder, and it's pictures of Ulster Bus. Okay, this was a brilliant picture, got lots of discussion going on. So, for example, I see 3 Ulster Bus. I see buses, blue and white. Lots of things, just basically list what you see. What I feel the buses are no longer used. I feel the buses are obsolete. I feel the buses are old. What do you think? Well, why do you think the buses are here? Why are they in a field? Why are they maybe not at a junkyard? So the kids can, really what they feel has happened. What are they here? Maybe what has happened on the bus in the past? What do they really feel? And maybe even wonder about who was on the bus. Where were they going? Were they traveling on the bus to celebrate different things that have gone on in their life? So this was good, and even some of the kids noticed where the buses were going to. You can see the names, 666, Newton Crommelin. So great discussion starters. I have even used them in the past for when we were studying the topic of Titanic, just as a topic opener, just to get lots of discussion, and the kids can, just discussion around the pictures. Okay, that's me.
Thank you, Jill. Folks, I wanted to move on then just to share with you some of our work on our use of thinking frames. And in Ashgrove, we use we use a number of different thinking frames, and this is an overview really of them. We have 7 or 8 different thinking frames that we use in school. We use them with varying complexity and at different levels. So all of our children, right from P1, they're introduced to these different thinking frames, and we use them then in a much more complex and different ways as we move then throughout the school. So what these do is that these give our children a very structured way in which they can present their thinking and they can present their thoughts. So, for example, with our sequencing frame, one of the ones that you can see straight in front of you on the screen, we would tie that very much so in with our literacy work and then with our writing. So, for example, our instructional writing. Our connecting frames there, you can see some of them there in the back. We would have a connecting factor, so that how something above and below the line, how they are connected. But we'll maybe move on to the next slide there, Charlotte, please. So this itself is a defining frame, and this is a defining frame for the different thinking frames that we have in school. So we have a describing frame, categorizing frames, connecting, sequencing, a cause and effect, defining frames, whole part frames, and a compare and contrast. So there's a wide range of frames which can be tied in with literacy, numeracy, world around us on all different parts of the curriculum. So I just want to share with you some examples right from P1 through to P7 of how we have used the various thinking frames. So on the next slide, just the next slide, Jarlath, please. On this slide, this is an example of a thinking frame that we have drawn in the playground. And this is actually painted. You can see the red lines. These are permanent lines on our playground. So it means that the teacher can go out and the teacher can change this thinking frame into any one of those various thinking frames that we showed you in the last slide. So the P1s were going out and they were thinking about their sounds work in this. And they were looking at, I think it was the P sounds. So the children had to draw inside the thinking frames all various different things that they could find and they could think of that started with the letter or the sounds P. Just the next slide, please. And this is also a defining frame, and the P1s were using their outdoor learning experiences to make a defining frame all about spring. So the P1s, excuse me, had a walk all around school, and you can see them there with their clipboards, and they gathered up leaves, they gathered up little flowers, bits of grass, and you can just about make out some chalk on the ground where the young kids that they were writing some of the things that they had found, and they were making a defining frame all about spring. And what that does is that it gives our children something clear and concrete to talk about. So that was just a really nice example of how we use very large thinking frames in school as well. Of course, very, very often that they're more often used on a much smaller scale on a page. So the children then took all of this information they had found, all of their words, all of their sounds, and then they made a spring poem with the information that they had found. So the next thinking frame, this is made using some tarpaulin. And on the right-hand side, this is a sequencing frame that the children had used in one of their forest school lessons. You can't really see it, but there's actually numbers there on those little pieces of wood. So the children search the grounds, they find these bits of wood with number sequences on them. They then used their twigs and they then made the arrows so that they then sequenced the numbers then in the correct order. They say the frame beside it, that is a categorizing frame. And the children were categorizing materials that they had found in the school grounds according to natural and man-made materials. Just the next slide, Jarlath, please. So as we move on up through the school, this is a whole part thinking frame. And our primary sixes were using the area of shapes. And this was a lesson that I had observed at one point last year. And the children were splitting up composite shapes. And you can see here that that they broke down the composite shapes from their whole part into smaller parts. So again, it's just a very nice, clear way for the children to present their thinking there. Just the next slide, please. So you can see here that we had a 15 centimeter squared shape, and the children then split it up into its two composite parts. So that started off then with the whole part and breaking it down then into the smaller pieces using that particular thinking frame. Just the next slide, Jarlath, please. So here we have on the right-hand side a compare and contrast frame. And this is a really good example of how thinking frames can be used in numeracy on up the school. So on the right-hand side are properties which are just bespoke to 17. So its prime number has a tens, and it's round to the nearest 10 equals 20. On the left-hand side in the red writing, these are qualities which are just bespoke to the number 27. So this child has identified that it has the various factors of 3, 9, 1, and 27, and so forth. In the middle, because it is a compare and contrast, so these are the items or the factors which both of these numbers then have in common. So a compare and contrast frame can be used for a wide range of issues. Our P3s just this week were using compare and contrast frames for the different seasons. They were using them for different woodland animals as well. And we might have an example of that later on in the presentation. The thinking frame beside us is a whole part frame, so you can really very clearly see how the numbers were broken down into their various parts. So you can really see a very clear link with how we can use thinking frames with numeracy. On the next slide, this is a connecting frame. So you can see here various fractions along the top, and the connecting factor is equivalent to. So 1/2 is equivalent to 4/8, or 1/2 is equivalent to 5/10. So you can really see how that can be used in numeracy there very, very clearly. On our next slide, this is an example of how we have used a thinking frames in our world around us topics. So this was P3, we're looking at, they had a topic of night, and this was a thinking frame about what they already know about the night time. They could hear different sounds. Maybe there might be fireworks. There could be people outside. Different animals come out at night, and around the perimeter, you will see in all thinking frames there is in fact a frame, and around the perimeter we have something called the reflective lens. And as teachers, we would also encourage the children to put in extra questions in there, and they would be prompts to really to go to the next level of thinking, just to go to something a little bit deeper there, and just to expand their knowledge. On the next slide, we have an example of categorizing frames, and these are woodland animals. So the P3s were categorizing animals which hibernate and animals then which do not hibernate. And I was reassured about 5 or 6 times when the P3 teacher said, "Mr. Smith, Robert said, these definitely do not hibernate." Said, I have checked that out. Beside that, we have then a defining frame on hibernation, which the P3s have used. So there's some really lovely use of language there coming through as well. On our next slide, we have an example of how our P5 have used thinking frames in the writing process. And this is just one of the displays which they have used. And you can see here down the bottom as well, they've used I see, I think, I wonder. And they've used their thinking frames in there as well. Just is to get an awful lot of that oracy going with our children as well, an awful lot of discussion work linked in with our topics and themes. On the next slide, I have an example right from foundation stage. This is from primary 1 of how P1s have used connecting frames. So the connecting factor, of course, here is starts with. So our umbrella starts with a sound, obviously the goat with a g sound, and an octopus, and so forth and so on. I felt that it was just important to put an example from foundation stage in there for you as well. So just to show how these thinking frames are used right from P7, right from P1 all the way through to P7. On the next slide, I have some examples here to share with you. So each thinking frame has its own particular hand action, and it's really amazing. You can go into a classroom and you can ask the children, what thinking frame does this show? And this thinking frame is a describing frame. This hand action is for a categorizing frame, because we start off with the whole part and it moves down then into the various different subparts as well. So the children are introduced to the hand actions as well, and all of that language and oracy then as they move throughout the school. That's a little bit of a whirlwind really of our thinking frames, but I wanted just to move on, folks, just to chat briefly with you about 16 habits of mind. And on the next slide, we have shared with you how we have broken down, how we have introduced the 16 habits of mind. So we decided to introduce, because there are so many of them and we really wanted to embed them properly. Just on the next slide there, Jarlath, please. We wanted to share with you how we have introduced 16 habits of mind over a period of 2 years. And one of the first habits of mind that we introduced, and bearing in mind it was coming back after COVID, it was persisting. And it was really trying to get the skills developed in our children where they really are very keen to stick at something, to really stick to develop that persistence and that perseverance. On the next slide, we really do promote and celebrate our 16 habits of mind. And one of the ways that we do it is that we have certificates that we would give out for our habits of mind in assembly, and they're given out every week, and we really do celebrate that as well. So hopefully, on the next slide, I should have a YouTube video just to share with you all. And this is, we have some of our children themselves in Ashgrove just talking about persisting, how they have developed it, and what they do to show persistence with their work. So Jarlath, hopefully this will work for us.
We may have to just send this video to people and share with them.
Okay.
Yeah. Possibly we'll do that. It's just this is a newer version of Teams, and I'm not sure how we are working here. As you probably saw, I was having a little bit of difficulty. So if I share again, everybody will be getting a copy of this, so they'll be able to watch the video in their own time.
Okay, that's great, Charles. No, certainly, of course.
Yeah,
of course. So whenever you do go and watch the video, you can actually hear from the children themselves about how they have developed persistence, and it's quite nice just to hear from the kids about what they get out of it, and how they have demonstrated those key skills as well. So on the next slide, we had some of our children talking about developing one of the habits of mind of thinking and communicating with clarity and precision. And one of the key skills with that is we tie that very clearly in with numeracy. And it's really trying to slow our children down to check and double check again. But those key messages are taught and they are shared explicitly in all year groups with all children. And that really is something that we have a very common language about in school as well. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Dave, and he is going to share with us a bit about our use of thinking hats in school as well. So thank you, Dave.
No problems. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. So we introduced thinking hats, would have been last August. So it feels like a lot longer, but we've actually only been using thinking hats in Ashgrove for the last year and a half or so. And they very quickly and very naturally kind of fitted into our everyday teaching. And as our pupils have become even more and more familiar with them, they've proven to be a really excellent support for solving problems, for working together, and then just really across the curriculum and everything that we've been doing. So the idea with De Bono's thinking hats, each of these hats, the 6 hats, have their own role, their own job to do. And the idea is that if a group is trying to solve a problem together, then they all put on the same hat at the same time so that everybody's thinking in the same way. And De Bono calls it lateral thinking. Everyone's thinking laterally. So whenever it came for us to introduce these hats in the first place, the first step was to do that individually. So we took each hat at a time, and we would have introduced the blue hat was the conductor. It decides what sort of thinking is needed for whatever task. The red hat was for emotions. How do you feel about something? What's your gut instinct? That sort of thing. The white hat is called the fact finder, gathering all the information that you might need for maybe a task, or if there is a problem that we're trying to solve, what are the facts and what's the information. The green hat is for the creator, so coming up with new ideas, and maybe trying to look at something in maybe a different way or a different perspective. The black hat we call the judge, and it's all about cautions, trying to think what are the possible limits or restrictions or barriers or things that might go wrong with whatever idea we've come up with. The yellow hat is the optimist. It's one of our favorites. It's good to look on the bright side, and it is for all the benefits of something. So if we do have a solution to a problem, why would that work? So the 6 hats go hand in hand. Like I said, we introduced them individually, and then we've started to use them together in groups. We're at the stage where they're maybe when we're reading a class novel, and if we're thinking about maybe how a character's feeling, we would make mention of the hats and would say, put your red hat thinking on, how is a character feeling in this situation? It really has become part of our everyday language, that common language that Robert spoke about earlier on. One of the real benefits of the thinking hats is just how visual they are. And on the next slide, you'll see we have some physical caps that we bought in to help us introduce the different types of thinking. And the pupils really do love putting those on physically. And it does help for everyone to put on the cap and to think in a certain way and to get the discussions going. We don't just use them for solving problems. In Key Stage 2, we've been using the hats to help us to work together for STEM projects. So maybe in a small group, we might use the white hat thinking to gather all that information and data that we might need. The green hat thinking to come up with some new ideas to solve whatever issues that we need to for the STEM. Yellow hat, why is this idea going to work? And what's good about it? What are the benefits? Black hat thinking, what might go wrong? Red hat, what's your gut feeling? How do you really feel about this? And then move on from that. So it can be really helpful with that situation. And then we've also used it even for things like peer and self-assessment. And the next slide, you'll see an example of where we maybe would have had 2 stars and a wish, and we've just simply used the 2 yellow hats. So what's a good idea, 2 really excellent things about a piece of work, and then a green hat for maybe what new idea could make this even better. The next slide shows a learning journal that we developed that used the thinking hats to kind of give our pupils a structure for self-reflection. So maybe on a Friday afternoon, for example, many of our classes or even individual pupils would take a few moments and would use these thinking hats to help us to reflect on the week that has just gone by, and to set targets for themselves the next week. On the next slide, it shows that we've also used thinking hats to help some of our pupils maybe reflect on maybe a situation that didn't quite go so well. This behavior reflection sheet is designed for children to consider maybe an incident, maybe in the playground, for example, and to separate out the facts of what actually happened from their feelings, to maybe see from different point of view, to reflect on their behavior, how they could maybe do things differently. And to be honest, we had many things like that already in place, but putting it into the context of using the thinking hats really has helped, and that's been really beneficial to get that common language, not just in each year, but throughout the whole school. And we actually have another one of those using thinking frames for our older pupils. I think for many years in Ashgrove, we have had a science week. And this year we decided to integrate our work with metacognition into our science week. So just in October past, we held our very first neuroscience week. And during this week, it was great. We held special assemblies. We had invited some guest experts to our school, and we carried out a range of classroom activities to learn all about the brain, how the brain works, how to keep it fit and healthy. So you can see here some of the younger pupils were making little clay models of the brain. On the next slide, it'll show you a hand model for the brain, and different parts of how the brain works, and specifically with memory. And I teach P7 here in Ashgrove as well, and I was very conscious of the P7s going through the transfer tests, and I was teaching them how their memory works and how to go from short-term memory to long-term memory. And to teach how that actually works for us, and then what can limit that. And if your emotions are running too high, then part of your brain won't be able to function correctly, and you won't be able to have the same to do the same level of learning. So as a whole week for our school, it was a very enjoyable focus. It's definitely something that we're keen to continue next year, and to integrate more of those metacognitive messages in all that we do. Robert mentioned at the very start, if you go to the next slide, he mentioned about Miles, myself as a learner scale. And it was important for us, and especially working with Thinking Matters, the University of Exeter, to try and I suppose see how to get a baseline, to get some hard evidence. So we can see from ourselves and looking at the children in our classes and in our school, we know it has had a really good effect, and it's made a big difference for many, but we needed to have that evidence to prove on paper just the impact that it has had. So we use this myself as a learner scale. On the next slide, you'll see the results of that. So every child in the school had completed this it's quite a short little assessment, and it's how they see themselves as a learner. So the more that we introduce these thinking tools, these thinking skills and personal capabilities, the more that we do that, and the idea is that they become much more, they see themselves as learners and how to learn, more metacognitive. In our first year, you can see that I was at the yellow one there, after we had an effect size of 0.4, and anything from 0.4 on would show a very high level of progress. And you can see we're almost at the very high for number 8 there after 3 years. Each year we have been, it's been improving, and it has had a huge impact on paper as well as what we're seeing in school. So that equates to 8 months extra development across each year group. So we're very pleased that we were able to have that data as well. And it's a nice way to be able to say that all of the effort that we have been putting in and all of these different visual routines, the thinking frames, the thinking hats, the habits of mind, all of those together, it has been proven to really increase not just academics, but how our pupils are more resilient and how they view themselves as learners and are more ready to learn. Could you go to the next slide, please, Jardith? And yeah, that's just really a summary of a sequence of our journey so far. And just the last one, please. And there we go. Thank you very much. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching. And I would like just to open the floor if anyone has any questions for us. I can see time's almost gone, but if you do have any questions, I'm happy to answer if I can.
That was really inspiring. Thank you, everyone. It's obvious that it's embedded throughout the school, and that's really important. And everybody the children know as they're going through that journey that they can develop that thinking. So it really is fantastic. Thank you very much to everybody. It looks like we haven't got any questions. We've I think you've covered everything. I'm going to have to go through the recording and the slides myself because there's so much content in there. I will share with everyone the slides and the recording and the evaluation link, and you can fill that in. And anybody who has any ideas for any further sessions, please feel free to get in touch, because it's really important that we reflect what teachers actually want. So thank you very much, the team from Ashgrove. That was amazing. To be quite honest with you, I'd need to remember to stop recording because this starting and stopping